Welcome to Tea and Strumpets, our spookiest episode of the year. I am your co-host Zoe, trying to have a more somber voice for you all to go with our spooky intro music. Anyhow, welcome. Today we have a little bit of something different for you. In fact, we were lucky enough to join Becky on her podcast, Too Stupid to Live, earlier this year, and we talked about a really fabulous novella called The Harvest Moon. It's a little paranormal, it's a lot Regency, and it's also just really awesome. And this was one that was recommended to us by Jeff and Will of the Big Gay Fiction podcast when they were on our podcast back in the day. So all sorts of cool recommendation loop kind of going through here. And we were just so excited to read this book and to talk about it. And now I'm even more excited that we're getting to share it with you. So anyhow, that's what you're going to hear today. Quick programming note. Unfortunately, my audio had a major issue and stopped recording halfway through. So the quality of audio for myself and Kelsey isn't what you're hearing right now. It's what Becky had as her backup recording. So thank goodness she had that, because we had such a fun time talking about this novella. And I would have been so sad if we had lost that, because it really is so great. So anyhow, I really hope you enjoy it. And if you want to learn more about Too Stupid to Live, if you're not already subscribed, you can do so. There's a link in the show notes so that you can find your way to learn more about her podcast. And I just want to say also, happy Halloween to all of you who are celebrating. Hopefully you are celebrating safely. It's a weird year for it, as it's a weird year for everything, but I hope you're safe and healthy and happy, and maybe you're indulging in some of your favorite fall treats, whether that be candy or pumpkin spice or whatever. I hope that you're doing that. So last but not least, I just do want to throw out a reminder that if you are an American citizen, it's time to vote next week. If you haven't already sent in your mail-in ballot, please do it. If you're voting by mail, and if you're voting in person, mask up, glove up, get yourself there early, make sure you get your voice heard. It's very important. So without any further ado, I hope you enjoy our episode with Becky from Too Stupid to Live on The Harvest Moon by Joshua Ian.
Hello, and welcome to Too Stupid to Live, a podcast that reviews romance novels $5 and under. I'm your host, Becky Feldman, and I hope you guys have a cup of tea right now and are sipping it as proper Regency-era characters do, because I have two very bright and fun and classy ladies on the show today. They are Kelsey and Zoe, the hosts of Tea and Strumpets. So we recorded this episode back in July, and they talk about what they have in upcoming episodes, which are now available. And the book we are reviewing today is Harvest Moon by Joshua Ian, which is currently 99 cents. That's 99 cents. Okay, so as some of you may know, I live in Los Angeles. I dabble in acting, and in fact, I just nailed an audition for the role of woman in line. But sometimes the industry and world in LA can get to me, and that's when I usually like to just get away for a bit and reassess what's important in life. And I'm sure a lot of people are like that, or at least were like that pre-COVID, where you just need to get away from your own world and kind of get a new perspective on things. So that's why I think the book The Rebellious Rancher by Kate Pierce may appeal to you. It certainly does to me, because it's about an actress who falls for this ruse by her parents to get away from the negative influences of Hollywood so she can learn the real meaning of life. And what's the meaning of life, you ask? Well, it's a sexy, rugged cowboy who's accompanying you on that adventure. So if you're a fan of Western romances and authors like Linda Lyell Miller, Jennifer Ryan, and Lindsay McKenna, definitely get your hands on The Rebellious Rancher. You can find all the info you need on tstlpodcast.com. So guys, oh my goodness, let's get to the show. Please enjoy this review of Harvest Moon. Okay, well, Kelsey, Zoe, Tea and Strumpets, gals, welcome to Too Stupid to Live.
Well, thank you so much for having us today.
Hello, hello. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited you guys are here. I love talking to fellow romance podcasters. So before we get into discussing romance, do you guys want to tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you met, and how you guys related on reading romance novels?
Yes, definitely. Kelsey, you want to do this?
Yes, I can get us started. So
right.
I met Zoe when I came down for an internship, essentially. Zoe and I are both, or Zoe is previously, and I still am, a horse trainer. And when I was first getting started in the business, I did essentially what was like an internship. So I went down to Southern California, and Zoe was the assistant, and she taught me everything I know. Aww. And when I walked in and I was getting to know Zoe, I noticed she had a bookshelf, and I was like, cool, I have all the books the same. So perfect. We already have something to talk about. And then as we lived together for 8 months. So at one point she was asking me what I was always reading, and I was like, oh, well, I'm a big fan of historical romance.
So and Zoe was like, what is that? And the rest is history. Once Kelsey handed me a historical romance, I was like, this is what I've been looking for all this time. So, yeah, I never looked back.
Nice. It was a match made in heaven. It was true love, a real love.
Yes.
So, it seems like listening to your podcast, you guys also seem like such history buffs. Do you think that's a correct way to describe yourselves?
I wouldn't say history buff. I would say lover of history and lover of weird facts. I think that's really my thing, is I'm very intrigued. I can easily go down a factual rabbit hole. And I find history interesting, but I find just society interesting, and I find people interesting. So I don't think I'm a buff, but I think I do have an appreciation.
Sure.
Kelsey definitely remembers a lot more than I do, from school and from studying, or just from learning in general. Things that you learn seem to stick in your head so much better.
Like I said, I like weird facts.
Yeah. I'm definitely I am super I'm a super big history appreciator also. I used to listen, or I still do. I listen to a bunch of history related podcasts. So I definitely like that genre. And I like general trivia. So anything that's interesting, I think kind of just, I find it fun and fascinating. So I think that's why the history resonates with me too.
Yeah. Is there a factoid you ever bring up to impress people? I one time looked up how sandwiches were invented, and it's the one thing I know. Do you have something like that where you're did you know?
I think I do this a lot, but I have really bad I have bad recall, in the sense that I can't always recall it right off the cuff. I'll give you one fun one, which was, my husband is South African. And when we first started dating, the first thing that was weird is he was like, how do you use a knife? Because I do it the American style, where you switch your fork into your undominant hand, and then you slice your meat up to little chunks, and then you switch your fork back to your dominant hand and eat it that way. But in continental culture, which is how he learned, you keep your fork in your undominant hand the whole time, and you use your knife to help kind of put things on your fork instead of do the stabby thing around your plate for a while. And so I found out that this was just an evolution, and it forks basically became popular as a utensil about the same time that they moved, they started colonizing over in the Americas. So the use of the fork just basically developed on its own in America, which is why Americans eat in what's called the zigzag method.
Wow.
And Europeans used the continental method. So
Okay.
there's a fun history random fact for you.
That's
Wow.
amazing. But I don't eat that way. I'm left-handed. And so I always... am
there
I
you go.
weird? Am I a weirdo? Should I
No.
just go?
No. I eat how it makes you happy. That's what I think.
So just hands all the time. That's it. Yeah. Or just milkshakes. I just drink milkshakes. That's what I'll do.
Sounds great. Yeah, for me, gosh, I'm sure there's so many. I'm like so irritating even at my work. Like we'll be having like roadmap meetings and all of a sudden I have to tangent to tell people some random fact about something. I can't remember the one I did last week, but yeah, I always have something and they're like, yeah, interesting, Zoe.
I know.
But I can't help myself. I don't really have a history fact. The that comes to mind at the moment that would be as impressive as Kelsey's. But I think like my random trivia knowledge that I always hang on to is like, Barbie's full name is Barbara Millicent Roberts. And so like, I feel that's really important for your pub trivia team.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I just learned something today.
Me too. I learned two things. One thing about forks and the other thing about Barbies, which are the two most important objects in my development as a human being. So thank you.
There you go.
So obviously you guys, Tea and Strumpets is a podcast about mostly Regency era romance novels and historical romance novels. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your podcast and how you guys decided to just like get together and start one?
Oh gosh. Well, yes. So about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, actually, I reached out to Kelsey because I love podcasts. I love podcasts so much. I mean, I'm the kind of person yeah.
It's Zoe's fault I'm into podcasts, actually.
Yeah.
I gave her romance novels and she gave me podcasts.
So beautiful. So beautiful.
We were a match made in heaven. Someone should write a book about us.
Yeah, here you go.
But yeah, so I've always been interested because it's an area that I love so much in starting some podcast of my own. But I never felt like I had an idea that was like worthy enough because you can start your own podcast about anything, but there are a million podcasts now about, I think. Excuse me. So I just like, if I'm going to do something, I want to do something that I really am invested in. And so then all of a sudden I was like, what if we did a podcast about romance novels? Because Kelsey and I love romance novels. And so we kind of like started going back and forth and talking about names and things. And then it became like more real. And I did a little bit of research. I was like, are there other romance podcasts? And so I Googled it and no other romance podcast came up. And I was like, I've hit the holy grail of the podcast like world. I've found the space where nobody else has gone. Okay, so obviously, if you're listening to this, you know that there are plenty of romance podcasts. So I did a bad Google.
We all do bad Googles. Oh my God, for sure.
Yeah. But you know what? It didn't matter. Like once I realized that there were great people in the space, I was not, deterred or upset. I was just like a little bit like, oh, good job, Zoe. But it was great because there are people making great art in this corner of the world about an art form that we love. So like, that's something to be celebrated. Like, that's awesome. Yeah. And I just was like excited to do a podcast because it kind of brought like a creative aspect back into my life where, as Kelsey mentioned, I used to be a horse trainer. And I just kind of moved out of that, career path. And it's a really hard one to leave because it's all encompassing. It's your life. And so you lose a big part of you when you do that. But I found this thing called weekends and they were really hard to give back up. So, so I've been enjoying the line of work that I do now and just been looking for other creative outlets. And so that's kind of how this was born. And we picked, talking about Regencies because that's honestly what we love to read. Like that's really all that we read. And honestly, we've read so many more types of romances and even types of historical romances since we started this podcast. And so like, I'm super grateful because it has definitely expanded like our view.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Go for it.
Oh, okay, sure. I had nothing. No. So obviously, like so many readers love the Regency era. What is it for you guys that kind of appeals? And also, I hope this isn't a silly question, but like, do horses come into play, just given that horses are like the primary mode of transportation? Is that like a really like weird question?
It's not a weird question, and it's really funny because every once in a while, like usually the horses are just objects, but every once in a while an author like captures like correctly what it is to ride a horse, or like how to signal, like how to give your horse cues. And Zoe and I really pick up on that.
Awesome.
And actually, and when we read recently, we actually had a quick comment about the confusion because they referred to a horse as two very distinctly types of horses.
Mm-hmm. Two different breeds.
Yeah, two different breeds, but they were specifically mentioning one horse. It was like one paragraph where they basically called it two separate breeds. And so Zoe and I are like, well, what kind of horse is it? We don't know. Like, if you're going to throw a detail like that in, like, we need consistency. But you called it one thing, and then you called it another. And those are very different animals.
Yeah. But it was interesting because one time we interviewed an author, and we both were like, we wanted to know, we were like, do you have horse experience? Because it read very natural. Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, I did grow up riding, and we were like, we knew it because it was just a couple little things of something that honestly, if you haven't ridden a horse before, you would have never done that thing. Mm-hmm. And even in your research, that wouldn't be something that would just like come up. But it is such a natural thing to do. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool when we were like, aha, we realized like, yes, you do have horse experience.
So I, obviously live in California like you guys, and I find myself having the same thing when someone writes something that takes place in Los Angeles and it's like traffic based, and I'm like, you would not take the 105 at 4 p.m. Just like things like that. Like, no, you've never been to California. So aside from the horses, what are some other aspects about the Regency era that kind of attracted you guys? Does Jane Austen have anything to do with it, or was it other authors?
So I don't always laugh about that because we are like the worst Jane author enthusiasts ever. AKA, like, I've only finished one Jane Austen book, and it just so happened to be Pride and Prejudice, and I only finished it because it was a graphic novel version of the book.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my God, I want to read that. That's great.
Oh, it was beautifully illustrated. But no, like, I've read bits and pieces of Austen, but it's just, for some reason, I love her stories. The plots, the characters, all of those are great. But then when I sit down to read her, I can't do it.
Oh my God,
I just can't.
For sure.
Yeah, I've read about 3/4 of Sense and Sensibility, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and it's one of my favorite movies ever. Mm-hmm. It's like top 3 favorite movies. But no, I haven't read Jane Austen, and yeah, I'm terrible and horrible for not having done that.
No, it actually makes me feel so much better because like sometimes I'm like, I didn't read that much Nora Roberts, and I love romance novels, and then I feel like such a fraud, but then it's like, no, you're not. It's fine.
It's fine. You can
find what you love. Exactly. And I think for me, the Regency period, like I didn't even know it was the Regency period until we like sort of started this podcast. I kind of like Regency romance wasn't even like a word that was like super in my vocabulary. We always called it historical romance. Mm-hmm. And I think most people don't realize that the Regency period like technically only lasted, what was it, 9 years, 11 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a very short period of time.
It's super short. And I think, it seems to me like, again, my experience with romance is mostly as a reader, and only the last year of my life is something more. So please forgive me if I am, kind of making up my own story here as I go. But it seems to me like from what I've learned that the Regency genre was really, started by Jane Austen and solidified by Georgette Hare. Mm-hmm. And I haven't read any Georgette Hare, but she had, she wrote a bunch of novels that were very much, there was a set of rules and a set of things, and a lot of people came after her and did the same thing because it was so popular and so fun. So Regency, like, even though we call it Victorian and Georgian kind of are like the same thing, there isn't a word for historical romance that's set in England and Scotland in the, late 1700s to the late 1800s. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what we really love. Right. But Regency is the closest term, I think. But yeah.
I think it's the most recognized term. I think when someone says like a Regency romance, like, mm-hmm. there's a broad window, and it's not just the technical Regency era. It encompasses like all of the 19th century.
But then there's a bunch of us that are like, actually, the Regency, like,
because it was just like the Prince Regent era, right? And that was like when the prince was growing up, and so by the time he became a prince, he was like, it's over, right? That's history.
Yeah, I think it was essentially like, but I think the Regency and the Georgian era are technically the same, because the Regency ended with Victoria becoming queen.
Oh, okay.
And
the Victorian era.
So I think the Regency is kind of essentially, what would you say? It's like post-Napoleonic Wars, pre-Victoria. It's like that quick window of time between those things. So,
but I think like why I like that period is because it's close enough in the past to feel familiar, but it's far enough removed to feel like a bit of a fantasy. And I really like, so there are rules that you kind of understand, like, there's no magic or, things like that I have to worry about, or like, I don't have to learn a school of magic or a system of magic, but I kind of know what's going to happen. And so that feels safe and comfortable, but also whimsical at the same time. And obviously like that period of history wasn't actually that romantic. Like there was a lot of like gross stuff in the streets and syphilis. But the way that it comes off in this genre of books, it's just like such a fun, it's just dresses and tea and like rides in Hyde Park.
Yeah, and I think that it's like, and there were a lot of new thoughts that came out of that Regency period. It was a time, especially post-Napoleonic Wars, like it was a time of great progress, essentially. Like most of the 19th century is marked by like huge progress. And so, like Zoe said, it's familiar because it's close enough in the past. But it still has that, and especially when, like, as an American, reading about the ladies and their dresses and going to balls and meeting the lords, that sweeps you away.
It's a fairy tale. Like, it's a fairy tale, but with, like, a little bit more rules.
Yeah. Are there particular authors or series that kind of, like, gets you going, or do you kind of explore different authors?
We're really trying to explore new authors. Like we've read quite a few new authors this year.
To us.
That's
what I mean. Yeah.
To us. But yeah, we started the series. So our first few episodes for our podcast, we started with the Pennyroyal Green series by Julie Ann Long. That was the series I had first introduced Zoe to when she was like, oh, well, what should I read? And I was like, oh, this series is great because it's fun. The characters are strong. You don't have a lot of like wilting, damsel in distress ladies. Like you've got strong female characters. So that's kind of like the series that we started it with because it's very near and dear to our hearts. But, I love Lisa Kleypas. I love most of those authors that are, Eloisa James, Sarah McLean, you can't go wrong with any of them. I pretty much will adore any author that gives a strong female character.
Yeah.
And that's something that we, in our podcast where we give everything a feminist rating, it's because like we truly admire when these books, which have such like an anti-feminist persona to like the general public, the thing is now, especially more modern authors, their female characters are strong. These books are super feminist. This is about women finding love, but also not sacrificing who they are. And they don't necessarily need the man to like save them, but it's nice to have the man along, know? So,
in your last podcast, the last episode, I forget the book, but you were talking about the main female character who had to sneak in to breastfeed her son and falls in love with his guardian. And she seemed like such a great, protagonist in that book. And I was going to ask you about that. Just what to you makes a strong female character?
So for me, it's not that the female has to be strong at the beginning, especially in a historical romance. Like our definition of strong, as in like outspoken and, you know, and convicted in her beliefs, because especially in historical times, a lot of these women were very oppressed, right? Like they have so few rights and they have so few things available to them. So usually, like, to me, I'd love to see an arc. I also love to see a character who starts out super strong and you know and set in her convictions. But to me, it's someone who usually finds her voice and kind of is not afraid to speak her mind or further her cause. And her cause doesn't have to be, you know, for the greater good. Her cause can be for her. Like her, you know, just the fact that at the end of the day, she has a happily ever after and she's at a better place. That can be a super strong character too, to me. So I know it's a bit abstract, but
no, I get it. Because it's like, I can almost think of, like, in books that I've read of, like, oh, what makes a strong female character? And I can think of the actual characters, and it's just like, I just want to be like, well, they're strong. Just read it and learn. You know what I mean? So I guess I put a big onus on you guys.
Well, I was thinking about a bunch of characters we've read recently, and like they're all strong, but in such different ways. Like I was thinking about in the Sarah MacLean book, Brazen of the Beast. We didn't review this on the podcast, but both of us have read it. I mean, that character, like, she comes out swinging, she's strong, she's, you know, doing things for herself. She's trying to take over her father's shipping business. You know, like she's like out there and doesn't let anything stop her. And then there's another character, you know, that like the character you referenced, right? She does daring things to take care of her son in A Duke, a Lady, The Lady, and a Baby by Vanessa Riley. That was the book. So she does daring things for her son, but then she also like waits and is patient, like, before revealing her true identity, because that's the way of like achieving her means. That's the best way of achieving her means. And then I was thinking about Maddie from Flowers in the Storm by Laura Kinsale, who is a Quaker, and she is caring for a duke who has lost his power of speech, and she's basically broken him out of a sanitarium. And she is, you know, wrestling with her beliefs and her attraction to him. And so she's extremely strong in her convictions, and to the point where, like, I don't love the character, but like I appreciate that she is who she is, you know? And so I don't know, there's like so many different dimensions.
Well, and I think too, and one thing we, you know, one of the other series we've been reviewing on our podcast is the Bridgerton series. And we were talking about, after reading Francesca's book, how Francesca Bridgerton is like the most subtly strong female. Like, and we talked about that through the whole thing. Like, she wasn't super brazen. She wasn't super over the top. And it's not like a lot of crazy things happened to her. You know, she didn't have quite as much going on as, say, Maddie in Flowers from the Storm. But Francesca Bridgerton just had this like subtle kind of conviction about her. And she did have to stop and question her motives and question what she wanted, because she was wrestling with her attraction to someone she didn't think she should be attracted to after the death of her husband, who she had loved. But throughout the whole book, you never doubted her strength as a female character. And I just to highlight more of, kind of Zoe said, how all these characters are strong, but in such very, very different ways.
Totally. Yeah. Do you guys ever have books that you review that you like strongly oppose each other's opinions? Like, you're like, no, you're wrong about this.
We've had a couple of those. We've had a couple of those.
Yeah, which two were it? So the first one was like the fifth book we ever reviewed. I can't even remember the name of it. It was the Jackie D'Alessandro book.
It was Mayhem at Midnight?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
And I felt like it was super unfeminist, and I was like really upset about it. And Kelsey was like, I don't know.
It didn't seem that bad to me. I was like, get what you're saying, but I don't hate it nearly as much as you do. And then the other one was
The Earl I Ruined.
The Earl I Ruined by Scarlett. I couldn't stand it.
I'm still upset. It's one of my favorite books.
Something about the characters just rubbed me the wrong way, and I was like, and I read it, and I was like, I understand why you like it. I really, truly do. But I have a very different opinion. Although, luckily, when we read the Raycast, we didn't review the Raycast, but we read the Raycast by Scarlett Peckham, and both of us were in firm agreement on that one.
Good.
So it has nothing bad to say about Scarlett. I love Scarlett. She's a wonderful human being. However, I have very strong opinions about the Earl I Ruined.
Which, like, thank goodness, because, like, the main character in The Earl I Ruined loves controversy. So I think she would have appreciated that.
Yeah,
that Kelsey
good.
and I were so divided on that.
Well, there you go. Well, I think that we should transition to talking about this amazing story that we read. You already know my thoughts now because I called it amazing, but I'll just talk about it pretty quickly. So the three of us reviewed The Harvest Moon, which is the first book in the Darkly Enchanted series. It is by Joshua Ian, and it is currently 99 cents, my favorite price aside from 0 cents. So a quick synopsis, and you guys can your synopsises that you guys give on your show is like far better than like my silly ones, but on the night of a full moon, Malcolm meets the seductive, gentle but mysterious Daniel. After a night of passion, Malcolm is exposed to a curse that torments what could be his one true love.
Ooh.
I feel like that encapsulates.
It 100% encapsulates this book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And our synopsises are out of control, and we need to control them.
I find it so entertaining.
Pare it down. Because we get too into them is the problem, and then we like lots of details, but it's like, oh, this is supposed to be short. This isn't the whole book.
Oh my God, 100%. Yeah, like I feel like I'm putting out an episode soon, and it's like, oh, we were talking step by step, and I just like wanted to like gush, and so yeah, it just like depends if you're like excited about the story. You're like, remember when that happened and that happened and that happened? It was so great.
Yes, but yeah, this book was actually recommended to us by Jeff and Will of the Big Gay Fiction podcast when they came on our podcast last year. So this is cool because to finally, I was like, oh, this is a perfect reason to read this book now. When you invited us to come on here. So I was excited to get to read this one.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad it was recommended because my first question was what is about, why did you guys choose to read this book? It is a supernatural book. And so what made you guys wanted to just seek into the sort of a subgenre of historical romance?
Well, to be honest, if I don't read historical romance, I have a very fond place in my heart for paranormal romance.
Nice.
So I actually really like paranormal romance and supernatural romance. So I definitely like to dive into that.
Yeah.
I mainly stick to historical. So this was a best of both worlds.
Of course, yeah.
It was supernatural and historical.
Absolutely. Just I love it. Do you guys have the book in front of you? Because I kind of want to talk about this cover.
Yeah. I've got the ebook. So let's go ahead and open up the cover here because I do have it.
Feel free if you want to describe it.
I believe there's a man with a billowy shirt that is open to his navel.
Yeah, it is open to his navel. You can see the almost the tattoo on his upper. Is that a bicep? The part where the shoulder meets the bicep, that sexy man part. He has a 76 pack. There's the fullest moon I have ever seen. I don't know if that's ever happened on this earth.
Oh, I've seen a moon that full.
You have?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's just where I live or what, but every once in a while, when the moon is super full, and we do have those harvest moons, those really big moons in the fall, and for some reason where I live, it'll just seem like the moon is you could touch it. That's how close it is. And so it's huge, and it'll be just sitting above the house lines. So it's not, and I live in the hilly area. Mm-hmm. So it's it'll just be right there. And I'm I'll stop and be damn, that's a nice moon.
Yeah. I guess maybe I've never, maybe on occasion I'm oh, that moon is a pretty big moon right now. But it was just this one, it was just so the moon is huge in the background, which is cool. It's very pretty. It's a very pretty harvest moon. So how do you guys feel about book covers where the male hero is mid taking off his shirt in just a random place?
I feel great.
Yeah.
I feel fine with that.
Sure.
I mean, for this story, this isn't the most random place he could be taking his shirt off.
Yeah. Because I'm always
Very true.
like, where is he going? Why is he taking his shirt off now? Is there someone in front of him? Like, I mean, I know it's a photo, you know, whatever, but it just like sometimes like mid-action poses on the cover just provides me with like more questions. Like, give me
There's
the
a
scenario.
there's a lot of questions here. I mean, like also the tattoo. Neither of the characters had a tattoo. I'm really into it, and I wish I learned more about the tattoo. So
Yeah. Hopefully in the series, maybe it like makes the tattoos make a presence. I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know. Covers are funny that way.
Yeah.
I'm also really into his font choices, though. Like, this is a great font. And I know that's like super little to say, but a lot of, I think, self-published, which I'm assuming he's self-published, and I probably should check before I say that. But regardless, a lot of these, you know, covers maybe don't look the most put together. And this one, like, this looks awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was like it's a pretty like eye-catching thing with just like the contrast of the yellow and the dark things. Also, I mean, again, I've been isolated in my house since March, and I'm like, that torso.
Hello. Great. Yeah, I have no problems with the torso.
No problems with the torso.
I mean, if men want to flash their abs at me, it's totally fine.
Yeah, guys, listen. At the end, we'll give you your Twitter account, and all the men who listen to this, just flash your abs. So yeah, I mean, what we read was a short story, but it was short and sweet and slightly passionate, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on like the character of Malcolm. He is our protagonist, and just how did you guys feel about him as a character in this short story?
I thought he was a very curious man.
Yeah, a curious man.
He's a curious man. No, I liked him. I think that was generally what it was, is he was like, you intrigue me in a way I've never been intrigued before. Mm-hmm. Sure, I'll follow you into the woods to your cabin by the lake, you know? Mm-hmm. And then he goes inside and he's like, oh, cool, you've got some cool jars over there. That looks a little ominous, but it's fine. Mm-hmm. He's like, wow, everyone's a little afraid to be here. He's like, no, I don't, why? Are you scary?
I think I got a pretty good measure of Malcolm like right away, which for a 47-page book, I was pretty happy with. Like, I actually really appreciated the line where he said something to the effect of, you know, his aunt really wanted him to get married and do his, you know, duty to the line, but he cared nothing for that. He just wanted to make money so that his sisters were totally, you know, good to go, and somebody else could worry about the line because he wasn't even interested in women anyway. Yeah. And so I was like, thank you. Clear right from the beginning, because we don't have, you know, 247 pages to like work up to that. So
right. Yeah. He definitely is a character who like knows who he is and was very like strong and had very like strong beliefs and was just like he goes after what he wants, and I definitely appreciated that. So he meets Daniel. He's like in a pub and he's like outside to get air, you know, as people do. You need your air. And he finds Daniel in like kind of in the woods, I guess. And he goes back to Daniel's house and they have a night of passion. And I know you guys rate the heat on your show. And so I wanted to get your heat rating. How hot is your tea based on their sexual encounter? Because I have my opinions.
Kelsey and I haven't talked about this, so I would say it was a little bit cold. Like, I was hoping for a little bit more. It just kind of was like, he went down on him and they had a passionate night. The next, then they woke up, and I was like, "Oh."
Well, it started off really strong because, like, they all of a sudden were taking off clothes, and then there was a kiss that like rocked him to his core, and then it was like, "Oh, now he's gonna go down on me," like, and then it was like, end scene, and I was like, "Oh man, like it started off really good." So it's like I had my favorite cup in front of me, and then I took a sip and was like, It's been sitting a little too long. Oops.
Yeah. I it was like, so when I make tea, for some reason, I heat it up in the microwave, even though I don't do that with my coffee. And I was like, this was like, if I was going to give it a rating, this was like, I put the tea in the microwave for a minute and I took the first sip, but then it went cold really fast.
Yeah. And and it was kind of disappointing because, like, as Kelsey was saying, like, it started, like, to get, like, well, it wasn't even just that there was, like, passion. It was, like, they had shared a lot of, like, intimate details with each other about their lives. So all of a sudden they had this connection built. And then I was like, what, where's the sex?
Yeah. It was, like, it didn't take away, the lack of sex didn't, like, make the book, like, less enjoyable for me, but I just felt like it was, like, ripe for more details, just given the passion that these two men, like, have for each other. But okay, so the next day Malcolm, or it's like the end of the night, or, you know, whatever, the sex is over and Malcolm has to go, but he sees something so startling within Daniel. Daniel tells him to leave, and Malcolm's like, what the fuck is going on? And then Daniel's, like, face changes, and Malcolm races out. And, like, I was like, because I didn't know what this was about, I was like, oh, is he about to turn into a werewolf? But that's not the case.
I was so waiting for a werewolf to happen. Yeah. I was ready for it.
Same.
I also didn't know what was gonna be, like, spoopy about it. I was like, what's the spooky accent, you know, or not act, what's what I was looking for, like, the spooky angle, like, what's the paranormal angle, like, where are we going? And it was just, like, not what I expected, but it was, but then I enjoyed it. So
same. Yeah. And obviously we can reveal the ending, as you guys know. So the next day Malcolm goes back to the pub and he, like, is like, what's up with this Daniel guy? And they're all like, who's Daniel? And then they mention that there's this old man who, like, wanders the woods all the time. And Malcolm's like, what? And then he hears about, like, I guess there's a town curse?
Well, yeah, someone says there's, like, oh, the curse on the town, because basically they were like, you shouldn't have been with him, or, like, if you saw him, you're the first to, like, leave alive. Most people go off with him, but they don't come back.
That's right.
You're the first person to come back, and then there's this weird thing is, like, maybe you're here to lift our curse.
Yeah, and it's
also,
like,
I'm sorry, this is just going to be a quick pause. I got very, like, Brigadoon vibes.
Same.
Off the beginning of this, because he's like, I've been traveling this road forever. I've never noticed this town before. Has this weird what is the word I'm looking for?
Copse of trees.
Copse of trees. And, you know, he's like, oh, but I've never noticed this town before. It seems like any other village around.
Yeah. And he
then
goes
it's got
exploring.
this, like, mysteriousness to it.
Yeah. But this comes back into play because Malcolm goes to find Daniel again, and he meets this old man who he discovers is Daniel. Daniel turns into an old man.
He's only a young man on the harvest moon.
Only on the harvest moon does he turn into a young, hot man.
Such a shame.
Such a shame. But in the end, so Daniel gives his backstory as to, like, what happened. He was in love with a man who was accused of being a witch, who was a witch. He gets killed by the townspeople who were really mean against witches. They did, like, the water test, as they do.
Yeah.
Is it heavier than a duck, right?
Yeah. Turns out human people are, witches or otherwise. And so I guess, like, Daniel, like, I didn't really, like, understand the curse that much. So basically he, like, grows old and he has to, like, search for his former lover?
I'm only saying this because I read this very recently. So it's very fresh in the brain.
Great.
So basically what it is his lover drowned because of the water test.
Yeah.
Supposedly. They brought him out and they're like, oh, well, he passed the test. Too bad he's dead.
I know. I hate when that
and
happens.
Daniel, like, went to mourn him, but then the villagers were like, it must be the other guy that's the witch. So then they go after Daniel. So then he has to flee. And then when he makes his way back to where the body had been, the body is no longer there. But the necklace that he always wore was. So he's like, oh, he must actually be alive and it's just gotten away. So he every year essentially does like a human sacrifice to get one more, like to have one more year of life to like keep living.
Searching.
So that's why he's an old man. He's been searching for like Lord knows how long.
Right, yeah. And so it seems like he was going to sacrifice Malcolm, and that's why he like told him to leave because because Malcolm is not worthy of sacrifice. He's such a wonderful man.
Yeah. Yeah, he's worthy of love instead.
He's worthy of love instead. But in the end, Malcolm is the one who helps Daniel, because in the end, Daniel's curse wasn't to find his former lover, it was to find love, which he does with Malcolm. And so Daniel turns back into his hot self.
It was a true Princess and the Frog moment.
It absolutely was. And then he and Malcolm live happily ever after. And then going back to the Brigadoon thing, the town disappears.
Oh, yeah. The town suddenly, he's like, yes. And then they're like, we've lived our lives together. And then when the train went through it, I'd always look to where I thought it would be. And I've never seen the town ever again. Yeah. So the town really was a Brigadoon.
It was a Brigadoon. And that like blew my mind. And I was like, oh, I hope in the series... Like, I was, like, thinking about the other people in the town, and it's like, are they okay? Like, did they move on to the next life? Like,
I wanted to know what was going to happen with the girl in the wedding dress. Yeah. She was like, so who knows?
Who knows? I hope they're okay. Hopefully in the other series they talk about it, they bring it up, but I'm going to hope that they're okay.
Yeah. Goodness. Yeah, I didn't really make the connection. It's funny that, as we were talking about it, because I was like, as I read it, I thought, well, what do they mean with the town not being there? Is it magical and it's just not there? But it absolutely, like, when you guys were talking about the curse, like, I think the town was cursed. Like, it was also, like, stuck in the 11th hour, like, just repeating time, in a weird time loop that they like couldn't get out of for some reason. So yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, I just watched that movie Palm Springs on Hulu. Then it's like a couple stuck in a time loop, and I'm like, oh my god, are these people stuck in a time loop? Are they ready to move on? Like, are they all miserable because they're living the same day again and again? Like, I hope not.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But on the whole, how did you guys? Because you guys. Oh, you rate each individual character 1 through 10, right?
That's what we do. Okay. It's arbitrary how we feel about them rating.
Sure, sure. I getcha. I mean, I rated Malcolm a 10, Daniel an 8. What did you guys rate them, if you could?
I mean, I liked Malcolm. I'd probably rate Malcolm more of like an 8 on my personal scale, and I would rate Daniel like a 7. I mean, why not? He's a good character. I mean, they have 47 pages to be characters.
I know. That's the hard thing. Zoe, I think my ratings are pretty much along your lines because, 7 for Daniel and 8 for Malcolm, simply because it's like you got some good conviction. Yeah. But it was very short. Like, I was like, I want to know more things. Tell me more things.
But I have to say, with 47 pages, it felt complete. Like, I was very impressed.
I was at beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah. Boom. And it was like, it really took you on a very, like, good emotional roller coaster. Like, I was stunned. That I could, like, feel this much in 47 pages.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, do you guys have any final thoughts you want to say about the book, and maybe a rate? My rating is A through F, like in school.
Well, I'd love to say something because I feel like his writing was actually really quite good. It got a little bit like fluffy in a couple of places. Like, he was making these kind of like fancy sentences, but in general, like, I really loved that. And can I read a quote from it? Because I really liked it. So he's talking about the harvest moon. So it's a very appropriate quote. And so it is, "It's the moon, of course," said Daniel, "the harvest moon. It is the last full moon before autumn comes upon us, the night when the warm months are leaving and when nature is welcoming in the dark." Oh, shoot. Change page.
Shoot, yeah.
"In the darkness and the cold. Everything alive bristles with one last flourish. There, can you see? The moon is said to be at its strongest on these nights. Its power holds the greatest sway just now." And I love that line of everything alive bristles with one last flourish. Like, it's well written.
It was very well written. I got swept away, and I was like sad when I got to the end. I was like, oh, that's the end?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that because I think like a lot of the time, especially when you've got something that's so short, it's like hard to be eloquent. And he was like very eloquent. Mm-hmm. Not that you have to be eloquent, but I don't know, his style came through. It was very easy to read. It was very easy to get swept away. And I thought it was like so well done for a little tiny snippet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a nice, like, refreshing hour, as opposed to, like, watching an hour of TV. You can read an hour of a love story.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I gave it an A+. I'm a really easy grader on this show. Everything gets an A+, except for, like, one book I hated. So, yeah, I mean, do you guys have a rating?
I would give it an A. I don't think you could ask anything much more than this little 47-page novella than it gives.
I'm going to say an A- only because I want more.
Yeah. I usually have that, like, when I read a novella or something short, I usually, like, that's my one thing of, like, why can't it be longer? But then also at the same time, I'm like, well, it was good as it is, too. Why am I wanting more? But I wanted more.
Yeah, no, I'm only saying that, I still remember once I was in college and I had a paper and I was pretty confident with the paper and the TA like graded it and gave it back to me and he gave me like, what was it? He gave me like an 80, it was like, it was like a 89.5,
Yeah.
And it's just like, you can do more. And I was like, because this is also like a TA I knew. So like I'd already taken classes with him. I'd already had him as my TA. He'd graded my papers before. So he like knew what I was capable of. So he's just like, you can do more. And I was like, God.
Okay, but this was his first book, Miss Professor. Like
that's what I'm saying. A-. I'm saying it can be like an 80 and a 94. Like
I think it's a 91 before it's an A-. My goodness.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
I made this at a 94.
Yeah, a 94 is a good grade.
That's a good grade.
It's still going to be an A on the report card. It won't affect your GPA. You'll still have a 4.0. Don't, Joshua, don't worry.
Please don't.
Please don't worry. Well, thank you guys so much for being guests. Do you guys want to talk about like what upcoming things you have going on for Tea and Strumpets and where we can find your podcast?
Sure. So upcoming, we actually haven't talked about August.
No, we haven't
planned our August episodes yet. I was thinking today, like, gosh, we have to do that. But next week, we're going to be covering, so the last two episodes of this month are a Pennyroyal Green book and a Bridgerton book. So like the kind of standard series that we've been going through. So those are lots of fun. And we had
we've already recorded our Pennyroyal Green episode and we were like, couldn't remember much of the book. And then we read it and then we were like, why did we forget this gem of a book?
This book such a treasure. It's a treasure. And I can't believe, like, this should be the book that I like recommend to people. I don't know what I'm thinking. So there's that. We have to figure that out. And and then we'll figure out September too.
Great. Well, yeah.
Big things. and to find us, we have a website. It's romancepod.com, and we're on all the socials at T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, Strumpets.
Awesome.
So,
yeah. And if any of your listeners have a book review for us or a book they would like to recommend, we do always have a section of our podcast where we give book recommendations from our listeners. So if you have a book recommendation you'd like to send us, and it doesn't have to be Regency, it can just be any great romance novel that you like, you can send that to us at romancepod@gmail.com.
Awesome. Everyone's book is going to be under $5. If someone's like, oh, I'm a Too Stupid to Live listener and it's over $6, you should punish them. Thank you guys. Go ahead.
I love the value. That's brilliant, because I today just saw a book that I've been wanting to read on sale, and I finally bought it, and I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna get to read this book.
I know, it's so nice.
In my price range.
Yay. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure most of your books probably are pretty reasonable. I feel like most romances are pretty reasonable, but
historicals tend to be less expensive too than the contemporaries I've been noticing, which is kind of weird. I would say most historicals from the big authors are standard new release $7.99. Yeah. And some are $3.99 if they're, indie published. So yeah, there's a lot of good reading to be had.
There is
decent value.
Yeah.
It's one of the best things about recommending historical romance to people. You can be like, look, it's budget reading.
Yeah, there you go. And we love that here. Well, thank you guys so much. This was delightful.
Thank you so much for having us. We had a great time.
Yay.
Thank you.
Hey guys, Becky again. One final thing before I go. Just wanted to let you know that TSTL may be taking a week off. And if you're listening to me right now and you're like, Becky, do you have a mild urinary tract infection right now? Oh my God, you're correct. I'm fine. I'm on antibiotics and, I went to the doctor. I'll be okay by tomorrow. But that's not why I'm taking a week off. So now, if you're probably thinking, oh yeah, whatever happened to your solo show about pelvic pain? You're in luck, because I am actually going to do a live stream of my show, Tight, Sexy Stories About Pelvic Pain, on August 28th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time as part of the White Fire Theater Streamfest. So if you miss the experience of live theater, why not get it where you can via a live streaming platform? And if you're like, Becky, why aren't you making some sort of joke about the term streaming in relation to your pelvic situation? I just, don't have the capacity to do that right now. I'll leave that up to you. But for info and tickets, you can check out beckyfeldman.com/tight. And I'll also include a link on the podcast website as well. Okay, bye. Too Stupid to Live is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. For more podcasts you'll love, visit frolic.media/podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.
Hey everybody, we are Learning the Tropes. I'm Erin.
I'm Clayton.
And I'm the romance novel veteran.
And I'm the virgin.
And every week we read a different romance novel and then we talk about what we loved about it. We talk about all of our favorite tropes. We talk about Only One Bed, Secret Places.
Secret Places, that's mine. You stole it. Every trope under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you a little taste of our show, we're going to play a clip from an episode where we reviewed Lorianne Donner's Fury. Justice was a secret perv. He wanted to bust in and see sex.
Oh, I mean, we can't tell you every single time they had sex or anything, Justice busted in. And it's like, just be cool, dude.
Uh-huh.
But also, Fury, put a sock on the door. Just be like, I'm banging my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Don't come in.
Bro code. Did the new species not know about bro code?
Learning the Tropes comes out every Wednesday, and you can listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts.
So come check us out.